All right, starting at our main page for Fusion, we have a project open, but we're not going to use that project. Actually, we're going to start with a file you already have. So open up your data panel over here. You're going to need to go to your student folder inside of our class, and then you'll see something that looks like this. It'll be 1.3.2 Trammel parts, and it has this like little weird icon rather than the like cube. So if you right click that, you'll hit Create Fusion Design. And hit Create Fusion Design. It's going to start uploading it, and you can see the bar down at the bottom left as well. As that bar is uploading, you just kind of gotta wait and hang out. We can close this in the meantime. Then in the top left, it says it has been updated, so we can refresh, and now that new part is there. We don't want, or you guys are going to open that one. I'm going to open the one I already have kind of pre-made that we're going to talk about. So we'll be at this point. We have a little block. This is going to be our base of our trammel. So I kind of already made the original chunk for you. Just a simple square extruded. If you need to change those, it's down here so you can edit those. These three canvases are something that I have that you don't, but we'll talk about those in a minute. So looking at this block, we need to add some dimensions. So going back to these canvases I've added in, it's essentially the dimensions for our block. So you should have the whole callouts for all these positions, but all the other dimensions are going to given to you already. So I'm going to use this as a reference. So to begin with, we have our block right here. We have the front plane in front of us. So I'm going to create a sketch on top of this box that I've already made. So in doing that, now I'm going to kind of replicate what's down here. So I want to make this square cutout first. So I know that square cutout is 0.406 up and 0.406 inside. So this corner is 0.406. So to make that happen, I need to add some dimensions. There are a lot of different ways you can do that. But to keep things simple, let's just make a little line. And we're going to call this, it needs to be 0.406 inches. And over here on the sketch palette, we have this called construction line. That's what we're going to use. So we're going to use that construction line. And now we're going to put this line at 180 degrees, which just means it's going to be flat. If I'm still making the line tool, you can see in the bottom right of my mouse. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to escape. So I can click and drag this dimension down below so it's out of my way. So 0.406, I have this line in now. These holes up top also are centered on 0.406, it looks like. So I want to make sure I have a line going all the way up for those as well. So to start, corner of my box or this square cutout is 0.406 up. So I'm going to make that. So I'm going to go up 0.406. Again, on construction lines right now, which is this little tooltip from your sketch palette. That just means it's a dotted line that's not going to mess with our geometry when we go to do things later on. So that was the first point here. So now I'm going to continue that, and we'll draw another line from the same starting point at the bottom. But this time I'm going to go up 2.75 inches. And I'm going to draw another one that's going to go up 3.875 inches. And then get it to snap so that it's 90 degrees. So I have these multiple points now that will be my square and these two holes eventually. So I can continue on. Again, I can grab these dimensions and kind of pull them off to the side so they're out of my way. So now looking at these two holes, we're going to have to find some dimensions to kind of appropriately add those in. So we'll talk about that in a second. Let's start with making our box. So if I hit this rectangle tool, there are some options. We have a 2-point rectangle, we have a 3-point rectangle, and a center rectangle. Since I'm starting in the bottom left point, I'm going to go with a 2-point rectangle. I'm going to turn off construction because I want this to be a whole block. So if I go down here and look, this square cutout is 1.25 and 1.25. So I can just punch in those dimensions. And to go between these two dimensions, if you hit the tab button, you can kind of go back and forth. So now that they both say 1.25, I can hit enter. Now I've made that square for my cutout later on. Continuing on, we have some more lines and cutouts we can make. So let's go, let's see. If we go to make, because we don't really have those dimensions, do we? Looking at this whole dimension, it is 2.875 up. And we need to find out how far in that is. So finding out how far in, it looks like I'm missing a couple dimensions on this sketch, which are dimensions that you guys would need to kind of figure out and pull from the Trammel. Since I don't have a Trammel base with me, we're going to kind of make it up as we go. So we have these 2 points. We'll start this top left. These 2 points are here. I'm going to mark out these other 2 points for the holes that we're going to add in. Just looking at it, not quite the same line as that. So if I go here and make a construction line, and I don't want it to be 1.25, maybe it's 1.15, or maybe, actually let's just go with 1 inch, that seems great. 1.1 inch, I'll snap there, then I'll come down and add my other point. For you, you're going to need to add the actual dimensions. So we have the points here. You should find out how far they are to get to these other points that are to the right of them. I'm just going to put 1.1 inches though for now. So I've drawn 2 lines from our original 2 points. So now I have 2 points over here. So we have the positions for those 4 holes. So now let's do the 4 holes in the bottom right. So again, kind of acting as if this was a square. We have them coming in, the difference between 4.25 and 3.875. And then same thing up here, it is 0.375 for this. So I can do another square that is 0.375, tab 0.375. Now I have a square that's putting me in the correct position for my first hole to exist. And I'm going to make a square this time, starting at that bottom right point. And I'm going up and to the left to get this hole. So I know this distance is 1.5. So the up and down should be 1.5 inches. Sorry, it should be 1.5 minus our 0.375 that we had already gone up. And then the same will be true down here, 1.5 minus 0.375. I can hit enter. So now the 4 points of this square will be these 4 points. And then I have this last hole, the 9th hole on here. It's 2.875 up, but I don't have a mark for how far in it is. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball. I'm going to assume it's going to be at the midpoint of these two. That's not the case, but that's what we'll do. So I'm going to grab this triangle mark, tells me it's the midpoint. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to go up. The number is 2.875. So if I go up 2.875, I'm at 90 degrees. I hit enter. So I have another point here. And you can see that line is different now. It's a yellowish orange line. It's just because it's not constrained, meaning if I were to grab this, we can kind of wiggle it around, which isn't something you are going to have because you're going to have that fully dimensioned. I'm just going to eyeball and say it should be about right there. That would be good for this purpose. And then finally, we have this rectangular cutout, and it is 1/2 inch down, and how far in does that go? Great, we don't have that dimension either. So you'll have to find out how far that goes in. 1/2 inch wide, and we know it's 3.25 to get to here, so this will be 3.75, so it's 0.5 inch there as well. It's 4.25 minus that 3.75, it's 0.5. So we'll get our construction line, get the top corner. We're going to come down 0.5, which is our 1/2 inch. Now we're going to build a rectangle, and this time we want to not be construction. We want it to be a solid object. We know it's going to be 0.5 from top to bottom, but we don't have a measurement for from here to here. So you would find that with your calipers, with the Trammel block. I don't have one on me, so I'm going to eyeball and say that's probably 1.65. Sounds like a good number. So we'll say that's that cutout. So now I have my 2 cutouts, and I have the positions where all my holes are going to go. So I'm at this point done with that sketch. So now we just talk about these holes. So you should have markings for all these holes, the callouts for the diameter and all those fun things. For those holes, we're going to create a sketch for each. So at this point, again, we're not in construction type, so it'll be a full object line. Type of circle I'm doing is center point diameter. So I'm picking the point and then drawing the diameter. This top left hole is going to be hole number 1. We'll put that there. This top right, I'm going to call it out as 4. Use your specific dimension measurements that you have collected. Don't worry about matching mine exactly. Same thing here. Just going to plug in all of these dimensions for each of these holes. And at this position, so now I have these 4 circles to the correct diameters. Now I can continue on, get the bottom 4 on the right side. And again, instead of typing in 1, 2, 3, or 4, you're going to have to actually put in your numbers for your dimensioned Trammel base block. I have all 9 holes present, or at least 9 circles present for all those holes. I have the 2 cutouts. So at this point, I can finish my sketch. And now I have my block with those dimensions present. So now we need to start sketching. So we're going to extrude. I'm going to start by extruding these 2 sections along with all of my blind holes, because those are all going to go the same distance, which is halfway through this block. So trying to find my blind holes. So picking the extrusions for these 2 cutouts along with my 4 blind holes going down this diagonal. And we're going to extrude half of the thickness of this block. So to do that, we're going to go negative 0.48 because that's the thickness of our block. But then we're going to do divided by 2. Or you could type in negative 0.24. Either way, you get to the same answer. At least this way you don't have to do the math. Fusion will do the math for you. So we do that. We have our cutouts, we have our blind holes, but the issue that's just come up is now all of our sketch has gone away. So if we go to sketches, we can unhide sketch 2, click this little eye icon. So we click the triangle to bring that drop down. Click the little eye icon, and we get our sketches again. So now we can do another extrude, and we'll grab the remaining holes since these are all through holes. So now for our through holes, instead of distance, we're going to go to object. If we look at the back side of this and we click the face on the opposite side, It's going to make a hole from our sketch originally, which is the top of this block, until it meets the bottom face, which is the back of our block. So if we do that cut command, now we have holes all the way through in the correct locations for this front sketch. Now we are done with this front sketch. Now we can go back and hide sketch number 2. And the front of the block is done. So now go to the back side, and we're going to continue our sketch down here. So to do that, create a sketch, click our block, looking at our block, a few different holes that we need to orient ourselves with, namely, I believe it's this one that is a circle, but then these other 4 are all hex patterns. So we're going to go through some different ways to make that happen. Easiest thing to do first, if we go to create a circle, if I go to the center of this hole, you can see it gets that little circle icon. That means I'm at the center of this circle that's already here, which is what I want. So I'm going to create a circle here and this new diameter of the circle, which you guys should have. So put in your measurement, whatever that is. So that's what that circle is going to be. These other positions are going to be a bit more tricky. So there are a few different ways to create polygons, which is what we want to do here. Depending on how you created or how you measured those hexagons, there are some different options for what you can do. There are inscribed polygons, which means they fit inside of a circle. So if you measured opposite points of the hexagon, you would use this. There are circumscribed polygons, which means they're measuring from the flat edge to the flat edge. So if you measured across the hexagons, you would use this polygon. Either case would work. It's just kind of dependent on which one you have done. So I think this hexagon will be easier to do, easier to measure across, since you have wide flat areas to kind of measure against, versus if you did the inscribed and you were doing corner to corner, it can be a bit more difficult to get your calipers all the way into that corner. So I would recommend doing the circumscribed, but we can do inscribed as well. Something you will notice is when you take that measurement on the caliper, it's going to give you the diameter, the full length across. But when we're doing this, it's giving us a radius. So whatever you got for that measurement, you need to take half of it, or just divide it by 2. So let's start by creating a polygon. I'm going to do inscribe because that's the measurement I have in front of me. And again, I get the center of that point. And I'm going to create a hexagon that is 0.422 is what I have, or if I just put in hex, and I'm going to divide that number by 2. So now I've created this hexagon in that exact position. Another feature you can do, rather than going to create and polygon and inscribe and all that again, if you just right click anywhere, you can do repeat. And if you did a function, you can have it do it again. So hexagon, whatever your hexagon dimension was, I'm just typing in divided by 2, putting in a hexagon. Same thing up here. My hexagon diameter divided by 2. And then finally, same thing, hexagon measurement divided by 2. So now I have my 4 hexagons here. You notice all those lines are blue. That just means I can grab these hexagons and kind of spin them. They're not locked down in that way. I can kind of lock them down, something we'll get into in a future lesson. If I want all of these to be oriented the same way like they are on the Trammel base, I can make this line parallel to this line parallel to this line, and this line parallel to this line. Doesn't necessarily matter which lines you pick as long as you make all 4 hexagons parallel to one another. So now when I rotate one, I rotate all of them, and then I can lock them all down if I pick parallel, pick one of these lines and pick one of the edge of the box. So now they all become black because now they're all fully constrained, which just means I can't wiggle them at all anymore. Not fully necessary for right now, but something that we'll talk about in the near future. So now I have my 4 hexagons centered around those holes, and I have this counter bore centered around that hole. I can finish my sketch, do an extrusion, pick all of those regions that we've just sketched out. And again, we want to go negative 0.48 divided by 2 because that's half of our thickness. And we've created that recess area for a head of a screw or for a nut of a bolt. So that is our Trammel base done. The next pieces you need to make, you're going to make the sliders. So there are 2 sliders. First we have the screw slider. So I have its document here. You have that paper in your drawer. We don't have anything to start with here, so we're just going to go off of this object. There are a lot of different ways you can make this happen. I don't particularly care which way you go about making this model, but we're going to go through one way together. So create a sketch. Right now we're looking at the front view in this case, or if we hit home, we can go back to home view. Looking at our canvas, we have the front view here. So I'm going to make sure that is my front view. So create a sketch. I want my sketch to be on this yellow pane because that would be my front view. And I'm going to start sketching my object out. So what I'm going to do is start from the origin. I'm going to grab a construction line and just make it, say, 5.5 inches over. All this is doing is saying that my screw block, in this case, is going to be exactly in this position, so I'll get constrained geometry. I'll get those black lines, which is what I want in this case. So making my front view, I don't want construction blocks anymore. The overall size of my front view, it is 0.844 tall and 1.75 inches wide. So now I've made this box so far, and I can see I have some other lines, other dimensions here, but those aren't going to be super useful to me just yet. So that's all I need for right now. Create this box. I'm going to extrude this box. Doesn't matter which direction you go with it. I'll just go that way for the sake of this. So now I'm looking at how wide or the depth of this block. So if I look up here, that is 0.734 inches. I can hit enter. So now I have the block as a full solid. So now I need to start cutting away some pieces that I don't need. So to do that, I'm going to create a sketch on this face so that I can cut away the 2 sides, the 2 like shoulders. So if I do that, looking at my drawing, it is 0.141 inches in on either side that I need to cut off, and it needs to have a height of 0.355. So what that means is if I create this sketch, I want to cut off a section that is 0.141 inches wide, and it needs to leave me with 0.355. Since I know this is 0.844 tall, so I'll put 0.844 minus 0.355. That'll make sure I stop at the right position. So I can do the same thing over here, and I could type in those numbers again. So one thing I can do is 0.141. So I know I have the right width, like into the block. But something else I can do is as I go, you can see kind of like snaps to line up with this other block. So I can do that, or I could type in my 0.489 again. Either way works. Or I could just make the box and I can hit the letter D and I can add that dimension afterwards. So I have all black lines, those are all happy. So I can cut away that section now. So I can finish this sketch. Extrude, I want to cut away both of these. and we'll go all the way through. Since I want to just go all the way through, if I kept going, this could eventually start cutting the other object. So I don't want it to do that. So in distance, I'm going to go to object, similar to what we did before. We're starting at that face, and I want it to cut until it gets to this face, which just means it'll cut all the way through this object. So now we have this piece. So the right side view looks good. The front view is getting closer. The top view, we're missing a couple things. So let's look at our hole that goes into the top. So let's do our top view. Our top view has a centered 0.177 inch through hole. When you see it's 0.367 up and 0.875 over. So we can create that. I'm going to do a sketch geometry. You see, trying to make or select a point down here is difficult because it's not part of our plane. So I can't pick a point on that shoulder. So to fix that, since my hole is being referenced off of that, off of the very bottom of the object, I can do something called project. So if you hit the letter P, it brings up this project toolbar. And I can pick the faces or the lines or the points that I want to be projected. In this case, I'll just pick those. And then once I've selected the things I want, I hit OK. And now it brings those lines or those dots or those pieces of geometry into my new sketch so that I can select from them. So I can create my box, go up to here. I want it to be 0.3367 inches high, and I want it to be over 0.875 inches. If I select that, it puts me in that position. Another way we could have done that is just by, since we knew it was in the center, in this point we can go along the edge of the block we had, get the center line, go down to the center line, and then we've connected those center lines and there's another center point at the middle. From this point, we need to add a circle, not construction, so we're going to go deselect the construction line over here, create a circle, and we want the diameter of that circle to be 0.177. Tap that in, and we have a hole going through, or at least a circle going through that will soon be a hole. So extrude that hole. Again, we want to go all the way through, so we're going to say to object, and we're going to pick the bottom face and hit OK for the cut. So now it cuts that hole all the way through our object. Getting closer. So we can also see there is a counter bore on the bottom, or rather, it's not a counter bore, it is a hex hole for a nut. We can see it is a 0.386 regular hexagon, and it tells you it is a depth of 0.255 inches. So we have this regular hexagon from the flat to the flat. So let's create a sketch on the bottom to make that happen. We already have the circle to reference already, so we know where the center is, where this is going to be. Ooh, it's upside down now. So we want a hexagon that is 0.386. And we also have it lined up so that the points of that hexagon are facing the long dimensions. So we can make that happen here. So we're going to create polygon. And since we have the dimensions of the flat side to the flat side, we want a circumscribed polygon. So if I go and select here at the center, you can see a circumscribed. That circle, the thing that I'm picking the radius of, is touching the flat edge. So that's the thing we want to do. And again, we know it's a diameter of 0.386. So if I put 0.386, that becomes too large because we have to divide that by 2 because the tool only lets us do with radius, not with diameter like it is here. So we have our regular hexagon, which just means that all of the sides are the same. They're centered about this hole. But like we said before, it is kind of free to rotate. So we're going to lock that down. So if I hit escape so I'm not touching anything, I hit parallel. I want this line to be parallel to the edge of this block. Now those lines turn black. They're fixed in place. I can finish that sketch. And it has a bore of 0.255. So extrude here, negative 0.255, enter. So now I have the recess for that hex pattern to exist. The only feature we're missing is it has this chamfer on all these edges. So if we look at this chamfer, we can see it's 0.125 in both directions, so it is equal chamfer on both sides. So we can make that happen pretty easily with our modify and chamfer tool. And if we select each of those lines, we can rotate around and grab these two as well. So we want an equal distance. We're going to say 0.125. That pulls all of those in. And enter. So now we have our screw slider block fully made from the dimensions on here, which will look similar to that drawing that we have. So there's our screw slider block. Again, here in our body. So one thing you guys will get better at and we'll need to start working on. Now we have two bodies here. We don't want to start confusing these bodies. So we're going to right click body one, go down to rename. We're going to call this Trammel base, hit enter. Right click body two, go down to rename. This is our screw slider and hit enter. So now these two parts, and now they're named so we know which one we're talking about. So one more body, one more thing to make. That is our pin slider. So I pulled up the canvas or the picture of the diagram you guys have. Create a sketch, same as before. I'm going to create it over here. I'm going to create a line that's just some distance away. Okay, let's say 8.5 inches away. It's locked at 0 degrees. Just so I can say that's where my block is going to start to be created at. So looking at this block has a lot of similarities. It has the same kind of chamfer going on at a 0.125 and 0.125. The only difference is it has this round over also occurring. So if we look at this, we can see it has a round over of 0.25. And in addition to that, it doesn't go all the way through with that counter bore. So that diameter on the bottom is 0.165 all the way through, but has a counter bore of 0.177, 0.633 inches. So we need to have a slightly different object. So to begin with, let's create the main block that we're going to be dealing with. I want to get off my construction lines now that I'm making the real thing. So this is 0.813. Ooh, sorry. Go to the other side. So tab up to the other dimension, 0.813 tall, and it is 1.75 long. So if I hit enter, I have my rough block kind of made out. So I can finish my sketch. I can extrude this block. We can go forward this time actually, so we'll go to the positive direction. It is 0.734 wide. So kind of same deal. We have the block here now. We can go different order this time. So now let's create a sketch on the bottom to make this through hole. So our hole is 0.165 through and 0.177 counterbore for 0.633. So we could do that with two sketches. We could make a smaller circle and cut all the way through. And we could create a slightly larger circle at 0.177 and cut it a certain distance through. But there's another way we can make that happen as well, similar to like the commands we saw in our practice on Monday. So if let's create a line, a construction line. We want to go from the midpoint to the midpoint and midpoint to midpoint. So now we have an intersection that's the exact center. We're going to create Where's in modify? Where is my... Actually, I think we can finish our sketch there. And now that we're in the 3D, the solid workspace, now we can create a hole. So we're going to create a hole on this surface. See, it starts with a generic thing. We don't want this large hole to begin with. So let's look up here. Extent is a distance. We want the hole to be all the way through. Hole type, we want a counter bore. And then hole tap, it's going all the way through, so it's just simple. And this is kind of talking about, we mentioned before, like at the base of it, like having that slight angle. Not something we need to really concern ourselves with yet. For now, just simple counter bore. It's going all the way through for our depth. The dimension or the diameter of our counter bore is 0.177. The diameter of our hole is 0.165. And the depth of our counter bore is 0.633. We do okay. So now that hole exists, and we can see that slight edge hanging out there. Looking at our hole here, there we go. But we also need to reference and have this on the center, so we could just drag it and have it sit right on the center. The way to get to that, now that we hit OK, anytime you need to edit one of those features, here's where our hole was added in. If we right click it, we can go to edit. Now we can kind of drag this to put it wherever you want it to go. Another way we could do that is reference, and we can say to reference this edge. So now it's checking on, so the reference that edge, if we say this should be 0.8 instead, that means it's going to come 0.8 off of this edge, but 0.875 is where we want it to be. So now we have the correct hole going all the way through. So now we're going to create another sketch. We're going to do it on this front face, or rather the right face. And we're going to cut off those two shelves like we did previously. A little bit more difficult to make happen. Since we have that round over, we need to kind of keep present. So to make that happen, we're going to just cut it as if it doesn't have a round over. And then I'll show you how we add the round over onto it afterwards. So 0.141, again, is how far that shelf is. And then 0.375 is how high up it needs to be. So we'll create a rectangle, 0.141 and 0.813 minus 0.375, because that'll give us the remaining height of 0.375. We'll add that one. Same thing over here, 0.141. And then we can have it match that side. And we get a little D icon to dimension that. Grab the dimension over here, hit enter. So they're all fully dimensioned. Finish our sketch, extrude both faces to the back of this, hit OK, and now we have those cutouts. So looking at those edges, they still have that same chamfer on them like the original one did. So we're going to do that again at a 0.125 chamfer. So create a chamfer, all four of those. .125, enter. So now looks very similar to our previous one, but we need to add that round over. So we're going to add a fillet, and it says a radius of 0.25. And let's see, if we add it onto those sections at a 0.25, we get this more interesting geometry coming up. And see it kind of shapes over. If I back this off, it will shape all the way down that line until it kind of meets with the start of the object. So now we have our round over for our pin slider. We get enter. Now that object is complete as well. So at this point, we can go to bodies. We can rename that last body. This is our pin slider. Hit enter. Now we have all three of those saved. This is already named 132 Trammel parts. So all you'll need to do at this point is hit save. It'll be a user save, and that's fine. So now that's saved, and I can reference it and go find it later to give you a grade for that.